With preseason expectations in the gutter, the Oklahoma City Thunder have strung together a pretty impressive season. They're right in the heart of a last-minute war to earn those final playoff spots in the West, and a huge component in that has been the continued development of Josh Giddey, who seemingly adds a new wrinkle to his game every time he steps on the floor. Giddey's big draw coming into the league as a draft prospect was that he's 6'8", but sees and reads the game like a giant point guard. He comes off a screen and is met with immediate resistance, but because of that size is able to find an angle to the roll man over the top of the defense. These are deliveries that smaller guards just can't generate, countering a switch by staying tall and slipping one right by the outstretched arm of a recovering defender. His vision is incredible. Off the catch, most players look to attack this advantage by either taking the wide open three or putting it down in that open driving lane, but he immediately sees a lob over the top that results in a layup. At just 20 years old, he's already an incredibly advanced and dynamic passer. He really likes to use just one hand, almost like a baseball, as he whips these at real high velocity. Notice how his eyes never leave the middle of the lane as he recognizes there's nobody defending the corner, and the speed at which he's able to snap it off the floor and into the pocket of a shooter makes closing out virtually impossible. He'll make these types of bullet passes from both a standstill and live dribble scenarios, and he's comfortable throwing them on the floor to bounce them into tighter windows or going airborne for some more range, adding a ton of versatility and making him less predictable. His passing ability is made so much more effective by how well he uses his offhand to make the exact same finds. As he comes off a screen going left, Brunson slides down from the weak side to tag the roller, opening up a live dribble skip pass with his left to create a quality look from three. And because he's just as comfortable throwing dimes with his left as he is with his right, there's no real way for defenses to force him into awkward angles. That principle also applies to how willing he is to sneak passes into seemingly impossible gaps. He's more than capable of making and capitalizing on high-risk, high-reward plays. Ayton's so focused on defending this screening action that by the time Giddey slings one of his fastballs to a cutting Williams, he has no idea what hit him. He's learning to pick his spots and sharpening up his decision making for when it's the right time to pass up good shots for great ones with every game. There's an open guy in the corner here, but an even higher percentage look under the basket. So he goes to the classic manipulation tactic of looking off the help to free up that interior pass, but it doesn't quite get all the way through. And I think this is a pretty good rep that bodes well for his development. If we take a look at some of Giddey's metrics as a playmaker, most measurements for passing ability and talent already tend to view him as one of the league's higher level guys, but a huge drawback for many people is that his actual shot creation lacks in comparison. He likes to play at a really high pace, looking to push in the open floor whenever he can, and I actually think he's already a pretty good engine in transition. Because he's big and a good defensive rebounder, he can eliminate that first pass and push right away, where he's comfortable making long-range outlets to streaking teammates or grabbing and going himself. When pushing at high speeds like this, he's real creative, using his handle to drive down the middle of the floor whenever he can, and capitalizing on any slight mistake a recovering defense makes with that passing. Because the Lakers' defense isn't set, there's no rim protector in position, so Giddey pushes towards the empty side to force a lone defender into helping for just a split second, which is all it takes to generate a free basket. It's not just on the ball where he's a threat to get out and run. After grabbing a board and getting it to a ball handler, he looks back and realizes that he can beat Brown down the floor, so he bursts into a full sprint to keep that separation and catches the ball with momentum for a routine floater. When the game starts to slow down, you'll see some more warts in his attack, but even in the half court, he's a pretty good driver who can generate paint touches at a decent rate. As of right now, he's still in a pretty experimental stage in his attacks, finding what works and what doesn't, which leads to some really nice flashes, but also some questionable possessions. Because he's limited athletically, he has to be a bit more creative in how he gets to the basket, changing directions with a behind the back before shedding the help with a really nice gather step that frees him up for a floater. He's not very explosive at all, and doesn't change speeds or directions necessarily well, so instead of getting to the rim from a standstill, he's at his best when given that space to build up some downhill steam, sort of like when he's in transition. His signature setup is to look at either a shooter or screener as he loads up before exploding in the opposite direction. Head fakes are a huge part of his driving game, setting up crossovers or in and outs to build up some speed going at the cup. These fakes and little pauses also help him run defenders into screens. It's a lot easier for him to get deeper in the paint when a roadblock is added into the path of his matchup. When he feels an angle getting cut off, he likes to spin into a new path, oftentimes to set up for a quick finish. Off of a dribble handoff, he attacks baseline, where Reed does a good job of closing off the basket, which he counters by twisting back towards the middle, where he frees up for 2 points. He also does a pretty good job of using his body to bump defenders off their spot and create openings with power. When Hart gets on his hip, notice the very subtle shoulder bump as he gathers, leading to a much easier floater. As he fills out his frame and gets stronger over the years, these plays will only become more and more common, and more strength also means more control. Developing better balance and flexibility will certainly help him as a slasher. Another thing I like about his driving game is how he uses his size advantage to finish over smaller defenders. He likes to get the ball over the top, often with the use of a floater, but he can also turn his back to the basket to make these looks even easier, building up speed into a favorable matchup with the give and go, and spinning into a little jump hook. With all of that said though, he's still a real limited finisher at the rim, struggling to create easy looks for himself, especially when paint defenders are in proper position. He doesn't have much length, which hurts the effectiveness of his strides. This is a really good move with the in and out into a gather step in the opposite direction, but that stride just doesn't generate enough separation on the finish like it would for a lengthier player. That lacking component also limits the release angles he can get to on his finger rolls, struggling to sneak by the arms of shot blockers or into tighter windows of opportunity. While he shows great touch on his push shots, most notably floaters and running hooks, I do think these finger rolls can come off a bit strong. He misses a decent amount of freebies, and sometimes just appears to be moving a bit too fast for his own good, putting too much heat off the glass. As a result, he's shooting just 64.5% at the rim, which lands him in the 21st percentile among all players. Another problem is that he hasn't yet figured out how to use his body to get to the free throw line. This is a massive skill to have, which not only earns free opportunities at points, but also poses another threat for defenders to worry about, and lacking in both departments leads to an overall true shooting percentage of just 49 on his drives, an even lower 20th percentile. Despite struggling to score on his own drives at times, he does still apply a pretty consistent enough rim pressure to create for others. Off of a screen, he appears to be going to a finger roll, but sees Claxton jumping to contest, and audibles into a beautiful mid-air dump off. With a bit more pace, he puts his head down for a baseline drive, which draws the help of Fox down low, while Barnes slides to the unoccupied corner to take away a kick out, freeing up a cutter in the middle. Here's another one where he sets up his defender to make contact with the screener, forcing Claxton to slide over, which opens up a lateral pass to the roller. As is typical with a young guard, he does still have his moments of tunnel vision, forcing tough looks when easier outlets are available, this time creating an advantage in the pick and roll that forces the low man to slide down and tag the big, which leaves Isaiah Joe, a 43% three-point shooter, wide open in the corner, but Giddey misses that opportunity and goes to a tough floater. This is definitely something that I think gets a lot better with age, and it's important to keep in mind that the sort of reads he's already capable of making in just his second season is incredibly impressive. With that said, his limitations as a driver are made that much more noticeable by other areas in which he struggles, which makes things tougher on him as a self-creator in the half court. He isn't a threat at all as a pull-up jump shooter, not just from 3, but mid-range as well, which means bigs don't really have to worry about playing him aggressively in the pick and roll, and in isolation, defenders can hone in completely on that driving. For this reason, when taking into consideration his size and skill set, I really like him as someone who can operate from the elbow or pinch post and utilize a ton of different options. He can play the dribble handoff game, where he's shown the ability to read defenses and fake and go. He can initiate off-ball actions, where just a slight step by a cutter is all it takes for free points, or if all other options fizzle out, he can force the issue himself by doing some damage in the paint. But with star scorer Shai Gilgeous-Alexander taking on the heavier chunk of offensive load, OKC has found that Giddey's a smooth operator away from the ball. Before we get into that though, I want to give a quick shout out to Basketball Index for helping with this analysis and the making of this video. If you're not familiar with the site, they provide tons of statistical measurements, tools, and easily accessible graphics to further guide your understanding of the sport. I earlier mentioned a few of their talent grades, and through their player profiles tab, I can easily compare them to other players around the league. Using Giddey's playmaking as an example, on this page I'm presented with various metrics detailing his ability to create for others, along with how he stacks up against his peers. By signing up with the code VENUE30, you can get 30% off your first month subscription, so I'll leave a link in the description below for anyone interested. And with that being said, let's take a look at Giddey's offensive package away from the ball. He's a really weak outside shooter. Since entering the league, he's hit just 29% of his wide open threes, and he just isn't treated as a threat to finish plays on the perimeter, not offering any spacing as teams almost dare him to shoot. But as you see here, when Chris Dunn rotates to the nail to help on a drive, Giddey immediately sprints backdoor for an easy dump off and finish. He's so good at positioning himself away from the ball that despite being a weak shooter, he just can't be left unattended by off-ball defenders. He has incredibly high feel, knowing exactly where to move or when to float into space for easy outlets, finding a seam in Portland's defense and slowly trotting his way to the middle of the lane where it's so effortless it almost looks fabricated. Again, it's subtle, but as Shai drives, he follows the ball from the opposite wing, and once the ball gets kicked out, that leaves him with a huge size advantage over Darius Garland, stealing deep position for an entry pass and open floater. He's also a real active cutter, diving at the basket whenever there's potential for a downhill finish, and he's especially good at operating on the baseline, setting himself up for easy dump-offs out of drives. I think this is really important because, albeit in a limited sample, he has shown to be capable of making some corner threes, and if he can get consistent enough to just make a good chunk of these, he can really open up this offense. His smart movement away from the ball also helps him a ton on the offensive glass. As SGA attacks in the pick and roll, watch Giddey just slowly make his way to the baseline where he can surprise Jalen Green with a box out and easy tip in. He's currently grabbing 2 offensive boards a game, which may not seem like a lot, but is a huge mark for a non-big, and it's just another way for him to get involved in the offense and set himself up for scoring opportunities without taking anything off the table from ball handlers around him. Another way he's able to do this is with how he plays off the catch. He's expecting a pass here, so he actually starts moving into his attack before touching the ball, which leads to a much more open driving lane. He's decisive in these spots, maximizing those advantages by attacking quickly or making the extra pass. He's already a great connector. Instead of holding the ball, he's always looking to move it with quick, sharp decisions that allow him to serve as a vital part in his team's creation, even if he's not the actual initiator. Perhaps no play better encompasses the Josh Giddey experience than this. As the inbounder, he throws a high velocity pass to the top of the key for a great look from 3, which misses, but is in position to snag the offensive rebound and throw a beautiful dime to a cutter for second chance points. All things considered, there's no denying that he's a flawed offensive player. At the moment, he just isn't an efficient scorer and can sometimes struggle as a creator in the half court, but the flashes are absolutely there, and his blend of size, passing, and overall feel for the game bode extremely well for the future, making him a key piece of the Thunder for years to come. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Giddey and just how good you believe he can be. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.